Hello and welcome to another edition of Octagons, Circles, and Squares, an NBC sports podcast covering the cage, the mat, and the ring. I'm your host, Stephen D'Agostino, and for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about the biggest storylines in combat sports. We'll start in College Park, Maryland, as the Big Ten Wrestling Championships are set to begin. We welcome on Big Ten Wrestling analyst Shane Sparks to break down some of the key brackets and some big upsets that could be on the horizon. UFC 299 is in Miami, Florida, and Francis Ngannou will face off against Anthony Joshua in the boxing ring. To break down both of those fights from a betting perspective, we welcome on NBC sports betting expert Brad Thomas to give some of his favorite bets from both events. But first, as opening day is just a few weeks away, it's time to draft your fantasy baseball team. Grab your Roto-World Baseball Draft Guide now for comprehensive positional rankings, projections, and player profiles to ensure your draft is a success. Visit NBCSports.com/draft guide to secure your guide today and use code BASEBALL24 to get 10% off your guide. Joined now by Shane Sparks, who I saw the Twitter feed recently that you're up very late the other night thinking about this weekend. So obviously plenty to get to, but how are you other than a little bit of lack of sleep going into
I'm
this
just
one?
fired up, Stephen. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate talking some wrestling with you today. Just fired up. I mean, this conference is so good. Nobody is safe in this conference, and that's what I really love about it. That opening whistle, things get serious and should be a lot of fun in College Park, Maryland. First time it's been at Maryland since the school joined the Big Ten. So just you can always expect some great scraps, and I don't expect this to be any different. Looking forward to it. I'm fired up.
You mentioned kind of that unexpected variable there, and I don't think there's a weight class probably that describes that more than 125, both nationally overall, but the Big Ten's no exception. And we could take a look quickly at the bracket here. Now, this is the pre-seeds, just for those watching. This isn't set in stone yet, but just going off the pre-seeds, this is what we're looking at. Number one, Mr. Ramos. Most layman wrestling fans even know him from last year's big win over Spencer Lee, but this has been a wild weight class all year, Shane.
It has been. I mean, you said it nationally. You talk to people who have been around this sport 40, 50 years, and they will tell you they haven't seen this kind of chaos. I think that's the word in describing 125 in the Big Ten and nationally. There's been, across the country, a handful of number one guys. But Matt Ramos has settled in really nice. Couple of tough losses early on in the season, but he hasn't lost since early December at the Cliff King Invitational in Vegas. He's really found a groove. He's been really good. Got some big wins. Big Ten, 4 of the top 5 guys are from the Big Ten. Ramos has wins over the number 2 seed Drake Ayala. He's got a win over Eric Barnett of Wisconsin. He's got a win against Patrick McKee of Minnesota. This weight class is nuts. And I mentioned Barnett. He's an All-American. McKee's an All-American. Barnett was a Big Ten finalist in 2022, I believe that was, in Lincoln when he fell to Nick Soriano, 2-time national champion. This weight class, and obviously talking to you, Stephen, number 7, Michael D'Agostino. This guy, you talk about landmines before. He had that great tournament a couple years ago, was 4th at the national tournaments. He's wrestled really well at the Big Tens, top 5 in his 4 previous Big Ten tournament appearances. He's got a funky style. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. He's got a unique style. He can scramble. He's dangerous. He's like a mousetrap that can suck you in. He's really good and dangerous in uncomfortable situations, and I like his approach. I talked to Michael last year at the national tournament. He told me something that was very interesting. Talked about his first-round matchup. He said, I don't know who I have in the first round. I don't, at that time anyways, he goes, I don't pay attention to it. I'm worried about myself. Him as a number 7 seed really sums this bracket up. You look at the number 6 seed, Braden Davis, phenomenal true freshman for Penn State. This weight class is nuts, and I have no idea how it's going to go down. Matt Ramos has found a groove. He's a winner. He's got some experience. I think he's the favorite, but at this weight class, you lose focus for a half a second, and it's going to be dangerous. This is Big Ten wrestling. You look at this bracket right here. This is Big Ten wrestling. This is the Big Ten tournament. McCrone, the 8 seed from Ohio State, he's a pinner. Dean Peterson, he's no slouch at number 9. I mean, damn, this is crazy when you see this laid out on paper on this bracket.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I'm glad you mentioned Peterson. I mean, I believe he has a win over McKee this year, which is absolutely berserk to think that it goes all the way to the 9 seed. The chaos happens. And I'll save my cheering for Michael this weekend. I'll try and keep a little bit more partial here, but I will say, I know he's not watching this video. He doesn't watch anything, doesn't want to know the brackets. He really thrives in these wild moments. So we'll see what
He's
Mike
got
can
the
do.
2 seed Drake Ayala potentially if he gets past Lujan in a 7-2 matchup, and that great dual meet in Ann Arbor, Michigan and Iowa. Michael beat Drake that Friday night. And I mean, he's just, you look at that bracket on the 7th seed, he's in a good spot because, like I said with him, what stands out to me is just his style of wrestling. He's funky, he's dangerous. You know, he's one of those guys you think you're in really good shape. You got to be thinking as a wrestler if you've never wrestled him. But of course, the secret's sort of the bag with him. He's been around a while, but he's one of those guys where you feel like you're in really, really good shape. And little do you know that that he has you exactly where he wants you. And that's what makes him, I would describe him, Stephen. I got a few of these guys over the course of the years. I would say this about Michael D'Agostino. He is highly combustible material handled with extreme care.
He lives up to the wild man nickname he's had his whole life.
And of course, a beard. I mean, if we're seeding a beard at this tournament, he's got one of the best beards, I think, in college wrestling history. It's epic.
I'm glad you mentioned the Michigan-Iowa duel there, because that's a good segue into our next weight class at 141, where we saw probably the duel of the night, and there was Lemley and Real Woods. Now we look at Real Woods here at the 3 seed. At top, though, is the Hammer, Bo Bartlett. Maybe not as crazy, but I mean, there's still some interesting matchups here, Shane.
Yeah, this weight class is obviously very top heavy. Probably doesn't have the depth as a 125 or a 157. But Bo Bartlett, of course, began his career at 149 because Nick Lee was at 141. Bartlett's last season was down at 141. I believe he was third at the Big Tens and third at the national tournaments. He's undefeated. He's just a winner. Great scrambler, really athletic, tough guy to score on, phenomenal footwork. He's the number 1 seed. And then you look at Lemley, as you mentioned before, the 5 seed. Lemley and Bartlett wrestled this year. Bartlett won, but Lemley gave him a great effort. Lemley, a true freshman, the number 5 seed, had that big win against, as you mentioned, Real Woods in Ann Arbor. Lemley and Grayson Clark. Grayson Clark's a 4-time Wisconsin State champion from Kekona, Wisconsin, one of the better true freshman campaigns in the country. Him and his teammate Joey Blaze at 157 doing a really good job for Tony Ursuline. Brock Hardy, the number 4 seed, Big Ten finalist a year ago, fell to Real Woods. He's an All-American. Real Woods hasn't been as, I think it's fair to say, hasn't been as dynamic, hasn't scored as many points as he did a year ago. Of course, last year his first loss was to Anthony Aliras in the national final at 141. He doesn't look like the same guy, but again, the experience, the guy knows how to win. Nothing would surprise me with Real Woods. And on the bottom there, a guy that I love is Jesse Mendez, the number 2 seed from Ohio State, All-American last year down at 133. He's now here at 141. Him and Woods have not wrestled this year. And Woods and Bartlett had a match in Iowa City that Bartlett beat the Hawkeye. But again, you look at this bracket and, again, I hate to assume things, but, when you glance at the bracket, potential matchups with Bartlett and Lemley again. And, then on the bottom with Woods and Mendez. And I mentioned Lemley. I mean, man, again, you look at some of the examples of what makes, tell me this is the Big Ten without telling me this is the Big Ten. I'll give you one. Lemley and Hardy in a quarterfinal. There you have it.
11 automatic qualifiers in this bracket, which is massive. So we know how deep this is. Do you think, Bartlett and Mendez wrestled? I think Bartlett edged him in overtime, just to give you an idea of how close that is. Anyone that could kind of foil another rematch there, 1 versus 2 here in this bracket?
Brock Hardy is a guy that, Brock Hardy and Bartlett had a really good match. There was a potentially dangerous call in about the final 40, 50 seconds in that match that, that drew some, raised some eyebrows, I guess you would say. You can't assume anything, but it was a really good match. I mean, these guys, you said it before with Bartlett and Mendez. These are like 1 takedown matches, 1 position matches. These are the kind of matchups where if I'm an athlete, it's like, man, can I find a way to score with 30 seconds left in a period and get a ride out? I mean, if one of these guys get a takedown and a ride out in the first period, take a 3-0 lead to the second period, I think points at this weight class are golden. I don't think anybody here, when I look at these guys, I mean, all 5 of these guys, I just don't see anybody blowing anybody out. I think they're all going to be really close. And the key is, and it's so cliche, but how do you navigate one match at a time and just stay focused? And it's easy for me to say that. It all sounds great in theory. It's another thing to execute it against the best guys in the country. This weight class, 1, 2, 3 nationally with Bartlett's and Woods and Mendez. I think Brock Hardy's like ranked. I think he's ranked maybe 5th. I mean, this weight class is hammer time at 141.
Another weight class with an undefeated Nittany Lion at top that's not guaranteed anything, which tells you how deep Big Tens are, is 157. Levi Haynes is a huge hammer, but this is a pretty tough weight class, especially with that. You look at that Michael Blockus here, who 15-1 on the year, and these guys haven't met yet this year, so it could be a collision course here in the final.
This weight class is another one where it's just like, looking at this bracket, it's like, whoa. But Levi Haynes, undefeated, of course, last year, Big Ten Freshman of the Year, beat Peyton Robb to win the final at the Big Tens, and then fell to Austin O'Connor of North Carolina in the NCAA final. He is definitely looking as good as he's ever looked. That match that he had against Jared Franick of Iowa, dominated that match, rode him for 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, Levi Haynes he's just, I think he's really raised some levels within this season. Michael Blockus down there at the number 2 seed, was an All-American last year at 149. I think he's 8-0. He's undefeated, I know, in Big Ten duels. I think he wrestled all 8, so he's dangerous. But, another Michigan Wolverine as a 7 seed, Will Lewan. Will Lewan's a Big Ten finalist. Will Lewan's a multiple-time All-American. Chase Eldate as the 6 seed. Chase Eldate, another 20-win campaign for him in that Michigan State singlet. He has 1 loss in Big Ten dual meets. That was a 7-6 loss in the second tiebreaker to Levi Haynes. I think maybe the wildest match this season. He's been great. So him as a 6 seed is pretty crazy. Peyton Robb, multiple-time All-American, Big Ten finalist as the 5 seed. Joey Blaze and Trevor Chumley. That, to me, might be the most, interesting first-round matchup of the tournament. Joey Blaze, phenomenal true freshman. Trevor Chumley, one of the leaders at Northwestern. He won the Midlands Championship a year ago. Jared Franick, the 4 seed. I mean, the upper half of that bracket is nuts. And then on the bottom, another storyline, Brayton Lee, a really good story. Great to see him wrestling. Was at Minnesota, All-American, suffered a really bad elbow injury a couple of years ago. And now he's in Indiana, and he's limited matches this year, but he hasn't lost yet. But if Brayton Lee is even 80% of what we've seen him in the past, he will add to the chaos of the bottom half. 157, looking at this, Stephen, I mean, literally put him in I think Haynes is the favorite. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Levi Haynes is still proven to be that guy, but you take everybody else, you put him in a bucket, draw a guy, and I'd play the card.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Blaze's brother, high school wrestler who wrestled Ramos this year,
yes,
earlier, to go full circle of the insanity of college wrestling this year. We could bring it all the way back to 25 there.
It's guys, you bring up a good example. Guys show up ready to win. I mean, Levi Haynes, true sophomore. I mean, last year, true freshman, makes the NCAA final, loses to Austin O'Connor, who I believe was a 6th-year guy in getting his 2nd national title. But, these young guys come to win. I mean, they don't come to fight, and there's a difference. Sergio Lemley is a great example at 141. I can promise you this, that right now, with every fiber of his being, Sergio Lemley is 100% convinced he's going to win the Big Tens. True freshman.
They say the National Wrestling Tournament is where March Madness starts. I think it really starts at this conference weekend, and Big Ten is chief among them. So super stoked to see it. I'll see you down there, Shane. Thanks for the time, and hopefully catch up on a little sleep before it gets wild in a few hours here.
Can't wait. Looking forward to seeing you, Steve. It should be a great weekend in Maryland.
Get your day started with Bet the Edge. Jay Croucher, Andrew Dinzik have all your betting needs covered, from the NBA, college hoops, the NHL, and more. New episodes drop every weekday at 6 a.m. Eastern. Whether you're targeting spreads and totals, circling player props, or looking for value in futures markets, they have it all. Speaking of bets, let's welcome on our very own Brad Thomas, try and win you some money on the fights this weekend. Brad?
What's up, Steven? Thanks for having me for another stacked card. I'm excited because there's a couple bets on here that I think are absolute must plays, but the entire card is just fun to watch. I'm going to go to the undercard here and go with Curtis Blades versus Jonathan Almeida, and I'm going to take Almeida on the money line. This fight was one that I wanted to dig into a little deeper because obviously we have another rising superstar or could be superstar in Almeida in this fight, taking on Blades, who should not be overlooked. I went with Almeida money line for a couple of reasons, right? Looking to improve to 7-0 against Blades. I think that he has a massive advantage in the grappling aspect, and it's no knock on Blades by any means. We know that Blades is going to be the most polished wrestler that he's fought so far, but the black belt Almeida just carries that I could put you out ability at any moment. I think that at this price, for a guy who is going to be able to finish this fight, in my opinion, is something that we can't overlook. Another fight I'm going to talk about, the title fight, O'Malley versus Chito Vera. I'm going to take O'Malley, and I'm going to lay the juice. Steven, we know the juice tolerance in the betting community is not very high, right? When you say, I'm going to lay the juice on a minus 230 favorite, people kind of turn their noses up. But this is a fight that I'm comfortable laying the juice here and taking the massive favorite for a couple of reasons. Let's talk about their first fight first, right? Maybe fluky finish by Vera. Speculation saying that O'Malley suffered nerve damage from the strike and then fell, and that's the reason he got finished. I kind of do buy into that. I do kind of buy into that the elite striker that O'Malley is going to push him through in this fight. O'Malley landing 7.25 significant strikes per minute. Vera doesn't get finished, so maybe if you want to spice this up, you take O'Malley by decision. But just with someone who has that legitimate striking prowess, I don't want to take that. I'll just rather lay the juice and take my money as it comes. Another reason O'Malley, the taller, the longer fighter with the reach advantage here. So it's pretty clear cut for me. Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou. Boxing match here. Anthony Joshua, massive favorite, right? Obviously deserved. But how deserved is it, right? Like, I want to say this, and I want to say this loud and clear. Francis Ngannou didn't just become a boxer to collect a check, to have these big bouts with big names for big purses, and that's all he cared about. In his Tyson Fury fight, we have to remember he dropped him in that fight, and it was actually a really impressive showing for Ngannou. But how much does that come down to it being Ngannou being that legitimate, or Tyson Fury kind of overlooking this fight? And I think it's more of the latter. But that's not to disrespect Ngannou. He has two things that I thought were really impressive in that fight. Number one, great ring technique. Number two, legitimate knockout power. Two things that Joshua should be afraid of. But when it comes down to the reasons why he's a minus 400 favorite, experience, right? He has the legitimate boxing experience, legitimate boxing matches, legitimate boxing training. That's just an upper leg that he has on Ngannou. Not saying Ngannou doesn't train, obviously, right? But this is a mixed martial artist who's stepping into a new venture in his career. So I think that, Anthony Joshua obviously should be cautious, but I think this is going to be a victory for Joshua, and obviously the bookmakers agree. But either way, man, this has been an absolutely stacked card for UFC here, and then we have a little bonus at the end. So thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you, Brad. And that'll do it for this edition of Octagon Circles and Squares. Be sure to follow us on YouTube and stay tuned in for the latest in combat sports news. Until then, enjoy the fights this weekend. We'll catch you next time.